Welcome back to Mean Streets, where each week we investigate the best, worst, and forgotten movies of film noir. I'm Luke Deckard.
And I'm Matthew Booth.
And we are your cinematic sleuths. And today's case is 2023's Strange Darling, starring Kyle Gallner and Willa Fitzgarld, written and directed by JT Mollner. The IMDb logline for Strange Darling is nothing is what it seems when a twisted one-night stand spirals into a serial killer's vicious murder spree. Strange Darling. Matt.
Luke. Not a film I knew this until you texted me and said, you've got to watch this and we must do an episode on it.
Well, this is the epitome. This is very much like Love Lies Bleeding. It's indie movie. It's indie movie. It premiered in 2023 at a festival, but didn't come out in cinemas until 2024 and released on DVD and Blu-ray and 4K in 2024.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where I follow Kyle Gallner on social media, and he is an incredible hype man for his stuff. And boy, was he pushing the bejesus out of this film when it finally hit a handful of theaters. It wasn't in many theaters at all. You could tell it was something he really, really believed in. And I think it played in a few UK cinemas, but it was nothing that it was nowhere that I could get to easily to see. So I just bit the bullet, and when it was released, when it was up for pre-order on 4K, I just ordered it without seeing it. And I thought, I've heard good things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna get it, and I'm just gonna see what happens because I like Kyle Gallner. This sounds really interesting, and I'm gonna take a stab in the dark and hope that I am rewarded, and I feel I was rewarded.
Well, there's an old saying, isn't there, that fortune favors the brave. I think it applies to
Matt Damon. Fortune favors the brave.
It's older than Matt Damon. I think it applies to your first viewing of this film because it's well worth taking a risk on.
Yes.
And it's funny you mentioned Love Lies Bleeding because I said something similar to my wife, and I said films like that and films like Strange Darling, they give me hope in a way because I'm very much down on modern cinema because I think it's pretty trash, with endless reboots and sequels, all the rest of it. And I think it's sort of lost its way. And then something like this and Love Lies Bleeding comes out of nowhere. And it reminds me that there are people making good films still, and that there are people that are willing to do things that they believe in still that aren't just this endless blockbusters. And these people need more exposure. These people deserve to have more exposure. And these films deserve to have more exposure because this is an absolute cracker.
They do. It reminds me, I recently watched Conclave, which I wish was neo-noir enough to fit in and squeeze in on Mean Streets, but it's just, I'm not sure that it is. I'm not sure that we could pull that off legitimately. But that is a film that, like this, like Love Lies Bleeding, contemporary film, absolutely fantastic, wonderful mystery, wonderful setting, wonderful cast, great dynamics, visually stunning. And if any of these were made in the 90s, would have been mega hits.
Absolutely. 100%.
I look at Strange Darling and even Love Lies Bleeding and Conclave. All of these films, if they had come out in the summer of 1996, 1997, would have been, even 98, any time in the 90s or 80s, they would have been, I feel like they have that potential to have been that instant classic because it's that excitement, it's that great character, it's that unique. There's a unique setting. There's unique visuals. There's great music. There's great this, that, and the other. It is a shame that cinema has become so boxed in by franchise IP and stupid dumbed down dialogue. I was listening today. as of at the time of recording, I've listened to the Section 31 review by our pals over at Spy Hards. And that's, go listen to their review. The film sounds dreadful. But they they also sort of pick up on that it's like everything is so sort of dumbed down, and there's so much pop culture reference, and everything has to be undercut with quips. And you feel that with modern cinema, and it's so frustrating. But then it's also so refreshing when you can find these gems like Strange Darling, where it's like, oh, it's a smart film written by smart people for smart people, instead of dumb people writing dumb movies for dumb people, which is the majority of what's coming out of Hollywood.
That's exactly how I felt about it. And unlike, I didn't know, as so often is the case, this probably says more about me than anybody else, but apart from Ed Begley Jr. and Barbara Hershey, I didn't know anybody in this. So it was even free from like names for me, so that these people were the characters.
Yes.
And it, if there was any justice in the world, the two leads in this would be showered with praise and awards, because the performances are absolutely out of this world, and not easy performances to give either. They work hard for whatever they were paid for this picture.
Yeah.
And I agree. It's like a real breath of fresh air. It's like a real sort of, ice cold beer when you've got a raging thirst. It's really nice when you get a film like this that absolutely lifts you out of franchise hell and doldrums.
Yes.
And makes you say, and it is a genre film. Let's be under no illusion about that. It is a genre film, but I have no problem with that, and it's done extremely well. And that doesn't really. Sometimes people say it's a genre film and are a bit snooty about it. It's impossible to be snooty about this because it's so well presented, and so well shot.
It's always funny when people complain about genre film in the way that even they do about like genre books. Like you think of like snobby prizes like the Booker Prize, where genre is looked down upon and mostly ignored because it's not literary enough and all that kind of bullshit. But I mean, Willa Fitzgerald was actually talked about why she loves genre so much, and from her point of view, for her, she sees genre as both horror and thriller as basically allegories for aspects of understanding aspects of the human condition. And
I agree.
And I agree with that as well. I mean, I think there's, a lot of times you read literary stuff or you watch the highbrow stuff, and it just feels a little bit up its own ass. Where genre has an ability to have a bit more fun. You can have we did a Lethal Weapon. You can have a fun, quippy, snappy movie that also has a heart to it, that has something to say about definitely something. And I don't think Strange Darling is devoid of that. I think this is in terms of its embracing the horror genre, there is, the horror of, A Night Gone Wrong, for sure.
Definitely.
Wonderfully blended in with classic thriller elements of cat and mouse and femme fatale and even visual noir cues.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things I really liked about it, which we'll talk about in more detail as we go, is its ability to very easily take tropes and totally turn them upside down. And that's because of what I consider to be a very clever screenplay, one which it's non-linear, but that's what its magic is. Sometimes when things are non-linear or they play around with the structure of it, you think they're doing this to try and be clever. They're doing this to try and be arty. This is a story that absolutely needs to be told in the way it is told, in the sequence that it is told.
Yeah.
Because it just wouldn't work otherwise. It's like I don't mean this way it's going to sound really, but like an Agatha Christie can't happen in any other way than she plots it, because otherwise the whole thing falls to pieces like a house of cards.
Yeah.
I have a similar thought to this, that if you showed these chapters in any other order than they are presented, the film wouldn't be as strong as it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's actually a very interesting point, because the director was talking about that. He basically, the film was at one point, because we kind of go behind the scenes and dive into the making of the film now, but he was talking about the making of the movie and how essentially Miramax took it away from him during the production and hired a new editor to recut the whole thing. And it was 70 minutes long, which I think the actual cut is 90 minutes, but their cut was 70 minutes, and it was edited in chronological order. And obviously that kind of annoyed, the director and the DP and the cast. And so what Mollner did was, apparently there was a clause in his contract that stipulated that there has to be a test screening of the director's cut. So according to the DP, Giovanni Ribis, they did a screening of the director's cut, and the audience absolutely loved it and had a huge response to it. And then Miramax were like, okay, fine, you clearly know what you're doing. Old producers sucking on their cigars, do not know what they're talking about. I
think I'm right. Sorry, I just cut you off. I think I'm right in saying that the producer actually apologized to him in the end.
I mean, maybe
said,
I would hope so.
You were right and we were wrong, essentially, is what he said.
Yeah.
And never a true word was spoken, I don't think. Because to if you showed this in, and we'll get into why I'm saying this as we go, but if you showed this in chronological order like the studio wanted to do, you would have had a pretty standard thriller, I think, that wouldn't really have been any different to a lot of others that you've seen of the same type.
Yeah.
It really is a story that benefits from the order in which its parts are shown as a whole.
Yeah.
And I say that because then you realize what the big twist is, and then you realize, you wouldn't have that. That would all be taken away from you if they showed it in chronological order.
Yeah. I agree.
It wouldn't play with the tropes that I want to talk about as we go. Anywhere near as daringly as it does, it would all come off as very hackneyed and very cheap, I think, if it was shown in a linear fashion.
Possibly. I don't disagree. I think the performances are so good and the film is so visually good and interesting that even if I were to see this cut of the film in a chronological order, so like what they did with with that film Sin City, where there's two cuts of that film.
Yeah.
The cut of Sin City in which I'm jumping ahead because actually this is an episode that I think this episode comes out well before this, so we're fine. As I said in that episode about Sin City, because what is time? This is not linear.
This is like a David Lynch episode all over again.
I know, right? Like that cut of Sin City, where there's one that is broken up into the comics, and then one that is jumps all over the place. The one that's linear, for one that follows each book of the comic, is terrible. Whereas the one that's chopped up is more easy to digest. I don't think this would necessarily suffer from that problem, but I do think, I do agree that you wouldn't benefit from the twists of it.
No, I think it would be. I don't think it would benefit. I don't think it would suffer in the way that Sin City would suffer, and indeed did suffer. But I don't, and I think it might well be a perfectly serviceable film, but I think it wouldn't be anywhere near as powerful as it is. And I think it would be a weaker film for it if it was presented in chronological order.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as I was watching this, I was thinking of Fargo. I was thinking of Out of the Past.
Out of the Past, yeah.
It's almost like this is a modern day Out of the Past in a way.
Yeah, I can get behind that. Yeah. I mean, it's not like Out of the Past in terms of story or anything like that, but I know what you mean in sense of subversing what you think you're going to get, playing with time and all that.
It plays with time, and it plays with femme fatale, and it plays with sexual manipulation, and plays
that.
with sort of male fantasy and female fears
and female fantasy and female fears.
Yep.
It plays with all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's doing that quite well. So it's and you sort of, that was something that Out of the Past did incredibly well. But then as also with Fargo is obviously quite famous for saying, "Oh, this is a true story. It's just all the facts are different."
That's right. Yeah. Well, and also, I was reminded in many quite often with Texas Chainsaw Massacre for things like that, which also presents itself as a true story.
Yes.
And the idea of this absolutely psychotic serial killer, and which we'll get onto, and the idea of this being like Midwest. I think is this Midwestern America and all that, and
somewhere,
that sort of homely feel just being totally disrupted by absolute madness. And what feels like a very independent film vibe. I was reminded quite a lot of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in this. Again, not in any way in terms of the story or anything like that, but just the just general vibe of it. Like you say, this is a true story where only the facts are made up. Sort of thing.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it's interesting, kind of looking at JT Mollner, the director, his writer-director, his writing process was quite interesting for this. It looking up what he was saying, basically this film didn't come to him in any sort of linear fashion either. Basically, parts would come to him. So like he envisioned things like this, like the quote, like the final girl running through the woods, and and then would think of another scene and then another scene, and basically wrote the film came to him out of sequence. Which is interesting. I mean, I don't know if you do this, but I sort of struggle to write that way. I sort of start with the beginning and think about where it needs to go. I don't really think of, oh, here's a fantastic ending or here's a fantastic middle and build something around it. My brain just doesn't work like that. So I sort of, I can start I tend to start at the beginning, like why has X killed Y? Yeah.
In my writing, but very often I will have an idea for a solution, a resolution, perhaps is the best way of putting it. And I work backwards then, but I can only work forwards or backwards in terms of plotting. I couldn't come up with the middle and then come up with the end and then come up with the beginning. I have to go in one direction at a time. I could write it out of sequence. That's not an issue, but plotting it and planning it, I have to go in one direction at a time. My brain isn't sophisticated enough to jump all over the place. Yeah.
He also said that he's not a very fast writer, but this one came to him quickly. So basically this was one of those, when the film industry sort of was beginning to emerge from the pandemic, he had this ready. Basically he wrote this thing within 6 months. And was ready to shoot. So it was a very, very fast production. I think it was one of those, it seems like it was one of those scripts that was just, this is so good and we've got to go with it. We got to get it done. And he had really good people, I think, backing him up and getting involved with the project that I think clearly must have made it easier to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when he went into the pitch, I think he only spoke for about 3 minutes before they said, yes, we'll do it. So it all seemed to, on paper, it sounds as if it was a very easy process.
Yes. It's just once it came to the editing, it became difficult.
It just became difficult when they started poking the nose in yet again.
Yeah. But no, I think I think this film is it just has a really good style to it that was one of the most refreshing things as I was watching it. I mean, we talked about, things like that in Love Lies Bleeding. This similar to that, you can just see a clear vision happening
of what he wanted and what he wanted to achieve.
Definitely. What JT was wanting to do, how he wanted this to look, how he wanted this structured, and he got the right people in place to make that happen. And you can just always tell when you have a confident director, and you can always tell when it's a creative creatively driven project
Mhm.
as opposed to a studio driven project. So you compare this to any Marvel movie of the past 10 years, and that is paint by numbers.
Yeah.
And is boring. And then you get this that is visually rich. And I mean, like, I love the colors of this film. I love
it's beautiful.
There's so many cool, like when the two leads, the lady and the demon, are sitting in the car in his truck outside a hotel, and there's that just
the blue neon
light. Yeah, that was such a. I love that stuff.
Yeah, I love all that stuff, and we've talked about this before about other films, and what you expect noir to be, because this is another one. Apart from that scene, that's all neon lights, light and shadow. The rest of it is sort of brilliant sunshine, daylight. You know, I don't know, forest, woods on one side and whatever it is, cornfields on the other. You know, and it's like the middle section of Superman. It's like Norman Rockwell. It's all that sort of brilliant, vistas. You know, and yet at its heart, it's as lethal and deadly as any noir. You know, I love that as well. That juxtaposition.
I do too. And that was a conscious decision for them, because I think they filmed out on the West Coast somewhere. I think it's in like, it might be like Washington State or somewhere in that general sort of area where it's all very woodsy and where they film stuff like Twilight and stuff, because it's just woodsy in small America. Where normally when you're in these sorts of places, it's dark and dreary and wet and rainy and things like that. And they consciously decided they didn't want to go that route. They didn't want any of those tropes. They wanted this to be bright and beautiful and almost fairy tale-esque at times. That scene quite early in there's a big opening scene in which the lady is running towards the camera for a very long time and then runs into the woods, and we see that she's being pursued by the demon with a gun. And by the demon, I'm referring to Kyle Gallner, if you've not seen this film. And if you haven't seen this film, spoilers. And if you haven't seen this film, go see it, duh. But when she's in the woods, there's this moment where she's smoking, and the way the smoke goes up and sort of hits the sun feels almost, it does feel like a fairy tale. It does feel like fairy tale. Otherworldly in those moments. And I it's part of what makes this stand out, I think.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I love that juxtaposition of it. We talked about it when we did, well, we've done a few films where we talked about the juxtaposition between, like the bright sunny day and the lethal plots that are going on in people's heads. And I think we mentioned it in passing about Blue Velvet when we did Mulholland Drive, that Lynch's idea of American suburbia, but underneath it's rotten to the core, and that's, you get that here because she's running. The first shot is her running through the woods, as you're saying. It's clear something's not right. I mean, she is a final girl. She comes across as a final girl, which is a horror trope. But again, usually the final girl's running through woods at night. She's running through the woods at broad daylight.
During the day,
and so that something's not quite right, but the surroundings in which something isn't quite right are absolutely breathtaking and beautiful. And already you're uneasy about that because it doesn't sit right. And it's because he's already, from the very first frame, he's taking what you expect to see and subverting it, and he does it all the way through. It's fabulous.
Yeah,
fabulous.
One of the director's quotes about this movie is that he said that I had this very stylized image in my head, and he wanted to make sure that beyond just style, there was some story here, or a unique side of a character we could show that we hadn't seen in other films, not just horror films, but films about people who are being pursued or in distress. And I think that is, that demonstrates that this guy knows what he's doing when it comes to storytelling. because
Definitely.
that is what he's saying here is it's not about just genre gimmicks and genre tropes. I need to make sure that these characters are interesting and have a story worth telling and do something that is going to wow you and keep you hooked. And I mean, utter success with this.
Utter success. And he's right as well, because you can tell a good horror film from a bad horror film. Well, you can do it in many ways, but one of the ways is it's not enough just to have a final girl. You've got to be rooting for her, and you've got to want her to survive. And one of the reasons that Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode in the very first Halloween works as the final girl is that all the way through, you've seen how good she is, but how shy she is, and how nerdy she is, and not aware of the world outside her own life.
Yeah.
So that when she has to confront the mother of all evil, when she stands up to it, it's all the more rewarding, and you're rooting for her 100%.
Yeah.
But if you didn't care about her, it would fall on its knees. And you don't care about a lot of the final girls in what then became the slasher subgenre of horror, because they're just cardboard cutouts.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think speaking of like the final girl stuff, we can dive more into the character. So Kyle Gallner plays the demon. I actually do know both of these actors from other things. So Kyle Gallner,
I knew it'd say more about me than it does about anybody else.
No. Kyle Gallner, he is a great actor who does a lot of smaller indie things. That I appreciate him doing, because he's too good of an actor to be doing some shit like Marvel or DC. Now I say that, well, but the first thing I ever saw Kyle in was Smallville.
I knew you were going to mention it.
Which was actually one of his, I think that was his first role. I think that might have been his first, and he stole the show. He played the Flash. Well, he played Impulse, which is one of the many Flashes. And that episode is by far one of the best episodes of Smallville of its entire 10-year run. And part of it's down to great writing, but part of it's down to his presence and the way he commands his character. And you just fall in love with him. And you're like, this guy's cool. This guy's fun.
Yeah.
Let's go on an adventure together. He's also I also saw him in Red Eye. I don't know if you ever saw that Cillian Murphy and Rachel McAdams film called Red Eye, where it's a thriller where they're stuck on a plane and he's like, I'm going to kill you. And
I have seen that. Yeah, I have seen that.
There's a group of teens who get on the plane.
And is he one of them?
He's one of the teens on that plane. Right. And he's very good in that as well. And when it comes to Willa Fitzgerald, the only thing I've seen her in is the first season of Reacher, where she played some lady cop. And she is unrecognizable in this compared to Reacher. Reacher, I thought, was so dull and so boring, and actors who I know can act looked like they couldn't act. And here, I was like, oh my God, here you go. Well, you get a chance to act, Willa, and you do a fantastic job. Oh my God.
Yeah, this should catapult her into, decent, full-blooded roles for a long time to come. She's absolutely outstanding in this.
Yeah,
and so is Kyle Gallner. I mean, he's captivating from the minute you first see him, and I love the way that they are both presented. What this film does is take your preconceptions and throw them back at you, and ram them down your throat. And I thought I knew where this film was going until it showed me I was wrong. But the two leads, I was absolutely captivated. But from the moment I saw him, when she comes running out of the woods in slow motion to "Love Hurts," the song "Love Hurts," I was just, wow, this is something else, because you don't know what's going on. You're instantly into the story, but you've no idea what it's about yet. So you've just got to bide your time, sort of thing. And then when you first see him pursuing her, with a
looking
gun
like an absolute badass,
looking absolutely lethal, and snorting cocaine over the steering wheel. And you think, what the fuck's going on here? And then you think, Jesus. And I don't know if this is intentional or not. But he's dressed in a red checked, like lumberjack
jacket, yeah.
And it instantly reminded me of Mick Taylor in Wolf Creek, who has a red and black checked shirt. And he's one of the most evil, psychopathic killers in horror. Brilliant film, Wolf Creek, if anyone's not seen it. And I thought, now I know what we're doing. I know what we're doing here. And
that's probably an homage. That's probably
is that a deliberate costume choice?
Probably,
because that's the vibe I'm getting off this bloke, the demon. And then you get a really good car chase, a really exciting car chase.
Holy goodness! Like
really exciting one.
That whole opening, that whole car chase is just it's maybe like 2 to 3 minutes or less, but it's exhilarating because he just feels, you're watching, the demon, he just seems so effing unhinged, and you're terrified for the lady, and you're like, oh my god, I hope she gets away, because he is just. Yeah, and then the crash and her jumping out and then running in the woods.
And she jumps out, running through the woods again, and then that whole business of she finds a tent or something. It's like an abandoned tent.
Yeah, like a hobo hideout or something like that.
Yeah, and she takes the she gets a smoke out of it and
the alcohol,
the bottle of alcohol. Yeah, she then for some reason she's got like no ear that's bleeding. And she pours the alcohol on it, and she's willing herself not to scream. And then
Mean Streets will return right after this. Who doesn't love a good boxing movie? Well, Steve Hunt presents the Boxing Movie Podcast. On each episode, Steve and his guests discuss a movie that has boxing as a theme. Do not be put off if you're not a fan of boxing, though. Of course, he covers the likes of Rocky and the sequels, but the depth of boxing-themed movies across cinema history is much greater than you might imagine. Boxing Movie Podcast has covered the early works of Hitchcock, explored the world of blaxploitation cinema, and the golden age of film noir, with episodes covering The Setup, Champion, and Stanley Kubrick's Killer's Kiss. You might not have previously considered yourself a boxing movie fan, but after listening to a few episodes of the Boxing Movie Podcast, you may have to reconsider that view. Find the Boxing Movie Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Now, back to the show.
You're just waiting for him to appear like Michael Myers.
Yes.
In the distance. And I was so for the first chapter of this film, it struck me like a horror film. Yes. I thought I was watching a horror film.
This plays like the finale of a horror film.
It's like the conclusion to a horror film. Yeah.
Yeah.
Until she bangs on Ed Begley Jr.'s door saying, "Can you help me?"
Yeah.
That is like the start of the end of a good horror film. What I think will have been a good horror film. Yeah. But I've come in at the last sort of quarter of an hour.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like with this opening bit, the way the demon is just so determined. It's very Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator.
It's Terminator, yeah. Definitely.
There is no change of expression on his face, really. It is just brows down, firm, like I'm ready to effing kill some shit. And then, but they continue to play with your expectations when he enters the house and he's walking around and you see a dead body and you see blood and you're like, oh my God, he shot that person. He did it because he's in there shooting. He's going, here, kitty, kitty, kitty.
And I love this because one of the things I love about this film, I think we were talking about Strangers on a Train. I made a point about Hitchcock saying, you should be able to tell a story in film with the sound turned down. There's very little dialogue in this film, really.
Oh yeah,
and it again, all to its credit. And in this second, we're sort of moved into the second chapter as presented now. He's going around this house, which, as you say, is now deserted, and there's a body on the floor. And I think I'm right in saying that the only words spoken are, "Here, kitty. Here, kitty." And it's really creepy.
I think so. Yeah,
if there's any more dialogue, it ain't much.
No,
it's mostly that. And he's walking through this house, like you say, armed with this gun, and he's looking for this girl who has been fleeing from him with absolute life-threatening determination. And he's just very softly, "Here, kitty, kitty, kitty," and it's really unsettling.
It is. It
really
is
unsettling.
It is. There are moments in his performance that they're trying to fool you. I think with the way he is saying things. So, for example, once we get out of that chapter and we're thrown back in time to the previous night where they pull up to the Blue Angel Hotel, and the classic neon sign, a classic blue neon sign. And I just the way that light is just bathing the hotel it's all oversaturated, but in just perfect ways, in ways that is hypnotic and unsettling, I feel. And in that scene where they're in the truck and they're talking about basically they've hooked up. They are
bathed in that blue neon as well, aren't they? They are.
Yes.
The screen is blue for the whole duration of this.
Fantastic. I love it.
It's beautiful to see.
So these two characters are hooking up for the night. They have met somewhere. They've gone to a hotel. The strong implication is that they're going to go in and have a little bit of hanky-panky. And there is some back and forth and a little bit of uncertainty. And they start talking about some serious issues. The woman's like, the lady is like, "Oh, I'm a bit nervous because, look, you're a guy, you probably don't have to worry so much. But as a woman, like, I go in there and you could kill me. You could be a serial killer."
She starts by asking if he is one. And
the film opens like that. The film opens in black and white in classic noir with her saying, "Are you a serial killer?
Are you a serial killer?" Yeah.
Yeah. Which we should have mentioned at the beginning, but
we should have done actually. Yeah. And then the next thing you see, she's racing it through the sun-drenched forests of wherever we are. But she does make an interesting and a very important point, and she says something along. I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, girls like having fun as well.
Yes,
it's just that we don't want murder to be the payoff.
Yes,
and we've seen in the news and we've seen on topical discussion programs and all the rest of it how women feel when they go out. And this is addressing that. This is grabbing that topic by the throat and throwing it straight in your face.
Yes.
She wants to have a good bit of fun on a one-night stand without being killed.
Yes.
And he's sort of saying, is that too much to ask? And and he's like, you can sort of tell that he's never really given that any thought. He doesn't, he sort of goes, well, no. No, I'm not.
Yeah, well, he doesn't say it like that, but I'll call because I want to get on that in a second, because that the beginning scene where she asks, "Are you a serial killer?" and it's all in black and white. The next quick scene is just of his torso, his head and torso, clearly strangling someone, and you're like, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah.
So the film sort of sets you up to think that she has escaped from him trying to kill her, and that moment where she says, "Are you a serial killer?" And he's like, "No." She's like, "No, I need you to look me in the eye and say it like, for real." And he's like, "No, I'm not a serial killer." Like, he says it in a way that is like a bit like the Joker from
I know what you mean.
Dark Knight.
His initial
says it in a way that's unsettling.
Yeah, his initial reaction when she says, "Are you a serial?" is to sort of to dismiss it though and say no. Yeah. And then she says, "I need you to look me in the eye and say it." And that's when he turns the creeps on.
Yeah. And he's like, "No, I'm not a serial killer." I'm just like, "Oh my God, dude, that is not the way to say it."
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I've never had this sort of encounter where somebody has prefaced it by asking if I'm a serial killer.
No.
So I don't quite know how I would respond to it either. But
well, I wouldn't say it like I'm not.
I wouldn't say it as if I were one. No, definitely.
No. Yeah. I really love the creepiness of what happens next, and that is we get the bedroom stuff.
Yeah.
And
now this is like a little one-act play for me.
It is like a one-act play.
Like a one-act piece of theatre.
And what a roller coaster it is.
Yeah, it's captivating. It's a film in its own right, this.
Yes.
It's amazing. The way that it shifts from one to the other is really like fascinating.
Yes.
And spellbinding. I could not take my eyes off this.
No, it was. That's because the lady was in her underwear.
I'm too old for all that.
I mean, yeah, and well,
what I should have said then was she? I didn't notice. I was too wrapped up in the drama.
Oh, we all noticed. Everyone also noticed Kyle Gallner as well because he's ripped as shit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
In that he looks like he's built like the Terminator in this, not like full Arnold, but he's like it's insane.
Yeah. There's something for everyone.
There's something for everyone in this scene.
In this scene.
Yeah. No, I think the obviously this part of the film starts playing with concepts of rough sex and that sort of
consensual sadomasochism.
Yes. Yep. But the thing is, before we get to before we understand that there's been consent, we don't know there's been consent.
No.
We just get to this bedroom scene where
he's cuffed her to the bed.
He's covered to the bed. She seems a bit into it, but then she's like being really mean to him. And he's sort of like, well, what do you want me to do? Like, do you want me to do this? Do you, like, and then she's sort of berating him a little bit. Yeah. And then eventually he gets angry and smacks her in the cuffs her properly, smacks her in the face and starts getting real rough with her. And she's crying. And you're like, oh my God, he's a nasty, evil person. He is a piece of shit.
And he starts saying things like, I'm going to put my foot in your mouth.
Yeah.
And, and all this sort of weird stuff. And
he's like, I'm going to start with my toes and it's going to end with my heel in your throat.
Yeah.
I was like, jeez.
This is really sort of unpleasant stuff.
Yes.
And he's got his hands around her throat and all sorts of things. And he says, you're not going to say anything. You're not going to do anything until I tell you. And I want you to call me sir.
Yeah.
And all this business. And she's saying, get off me. What do you think you're doing? And he's really like strangling her.
Yeah.
And until the end, she has to choke out, yes, sir. You know. And you think, my God. And of course, we've already had the scene where we see him snorting coke while he's driving, and he's got the shotgun in his hand all the time. So you think he's a nutter.
He's the killer. Yes.
He's an absolute maniac.
Yes.
And we should have said it. The whole film is prefaced by one of the most prolific serial killers in American history has been terrorizing Wyoming and wherever else it is.
Yeah.
And you think, well, this is him, Jesus.
Yes. Yeah.
But I know that she must get out of this, you're saying to yourself, because I've seen her running through the woods and pouring alcohol on a severed ear. And she's gone to Ed Begley Jr. So how the hell is she going to get out of this? What does she do?
Yes. Well, she says, Mr. Snuffleupagus.
Mr. Snuffleupagus. Yeah.
And then that's when, and this is where it's like, the non-linearness of this film worked in his favor. And it's one of those things
when it starts to kick in. Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's some, I could see some people like, oh, but this film isn't playing fair because it's just withholding information. And I don't see it that way.
No.
Each scene is its own sort of unique character study. Each scene feels like a film in and of itself.
Like a vignette. Yeah, it's like 6 vignettes.
Yes, and you're sort of piecing the vignettes together to tell a wider story, and I'm fine with that. So when we she says the safe word, which is Mr. Snuffleupagus, then we go back to them being in the car, and then the consent and all that kind of stuff. And there's the one sort of foreshadow, and that is that he has a gun strapped to his ankle.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've watched all of this mean sex stuff, then it turns out to be part of what she wants, and he's kind of uncomfortable with it. But he still has a gun.
Yeah.
And what does that mean?
What does that mean? Because at one point she says, "How could you say all those awful things to me?" And she's crying.
Yes.
And he says, he's really taken aback by it. This is when you realize it was all her wish and request.
Yes, well, you told me to.
And he goes, "Oh, I thought you wanted it. I thought you liked it like that." And he said, "Oh, look, I'm sorry." And then she starts laughing at him.
Yes.
Yes. And you think, blimey, maybe she's crazy and all. But
yes.
But then I started to think, well, is this her way of, like, is this how she's going to escape, really? Is this how she's going to get out of it? She's going to start, manipulating him somehow. And he thought, no, that doesn't really square up, So all you've got to do is, the only choice you've got is to sit and watch how it plays out.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't agree. I don't agree. Going back to the point about, this film is cheating. I don't agree with that either. I think what this film is doing.
I mean, no one has said that I've seen. I'm just saying I could see people.
And I can as well. But if anybody did, I would say no. What it's doing is it's making you work for the information.
Yeah,
it's going to give it you all. It's just not going to give it you in the order in which you think it should be presented. Well, that's your lookout.
Yeah. Now, this is where the film flips everything on its head, and this whole time we're thinking the lady is the final girl, and we're thinking the demon is the monster, is the Michael Meyer, Jason character.
He's the serial killer that's been terrorizing Wyoming.
Yeah, and this is when everything just gets totally flipped on its head, and then you suddenly realize Kyle Gallner's the demon, is the final girl.
Yeah. And
she, the lady, the femme fatale, comes to life in full bloom, and that is the monster. She's the psycho. Yeah. And sort of speaking a bit more on connections to Out of the Past, the ending, I'm not going to detail yet, but that ending is very much like Out of the Past, in which, we know what both of their fates are as they're driving in that car and Out of the Past. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, so basically what then happens is I love the fact that she just keeps pushing his buttons. Like, he clearly wants to have sex, and she is just toying with him. And you realize this whole thing has been her just messing with him. Then she starts being mean again. She goes and has a line of coke, and she starts being mean again. He's like, "I thought this stuff was meant to make you horny. You're just being a bitch." And that's right. Yeah. Then he takes a line of coke, and she's trying to do. He's thinking, "Oh, maybe this is finally going to go somewhere," and then she cuffs him to the bed, and he starts drifting because he's been poisoned. And what she says something along the lines of, "This is cocaine." And she holds a packet up. Yes. And she holds a ball up and goes, "But this is ketamine." Yes. And he starts foaming at the mouth. Yes. And at that point, I'm screaming at the TV, saying, yes. "What?" Yes. I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't seeing that coming. No. And then I'm thinking, how is he going to get out of this? Yeah. So my allegiance has suddenly turned completely. Totally. Because you find out as well that he's a cop. Yes. So I'm now like, Jesus, all that sympathy you witch, all that sympathy I had for you, gone now. Yes. What this has suddenly really turned me upside down. Yes. The expectation, but also made me, as I thought about it later, it's saying something about your preconceptions, because the preconception is that the man is the monster. Yes. And that's what the film presents you with, and that's what you readily accept. Yes. Until the film just says, "Got you." And what a great got you it is. Yeah. Oh my God. Yes, it's true. And then she's like, she's basically confesses to being a serial killer. And then she starts carving her initials in his chest. And it's so gory. It's so horrific. And this is kind of the stuff where I think the horror elements are coming out. Though, to be fair, I mean, there are horror elements and body horror elements in film noir and neo noir. So it still fits, I think, quite easily within the thriller neo-noir framework.
It has. Yeah, I don't think it goes so far into horror like something like Silence of the Lambs does. I think this is much more of. I wouldn't categorize this as a horror. I would categorize this as a thriller.
Yeah.
Whereas I think I would certainly categorize Silence of the Lambs as a horror.
Yeah.
You know, more so than thriller. I mean, it's a thriller as well, but that leans more into what I consider to be horror than this does. But what I liked about the carving in the chest is it's so realistic. You know, there's no, and she even feels the wound to make sure she's done it satisfactorily, and it looks so real.
Yeah,
I can't remember what she's done it with, but it looks like a Stanley knife or something, or a razor blade, like that, yeah. And it just looks as it would. You know, it's so well done. Makeup is brilliant.
It is. It's yeah. You're like I said. So your allegiance totally flips with this. Now, you know, you've sort of already begun to flip. I think we should talk about the hippies.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
You know, I think we should talk about Ed Begley and Barbara Hershey.
Barbara Hershey, yeah.
Frederick and Genevieve. Genevieve. And I love this like hippie biker couple, and I love their breakfast. It is so disgusting.
I was going to say, what the hell is that breakfast?
When we watched this, me and my wife watched this, we were just like, what are they making? Like, are they like some sort of cult? Are they going to like go like just fill themselves up and then just like go kill themselves? Like, what is, you know?
It's like, it's like an omelet, isn't it? But it's got half a packet of butter in it.
There's half a packet of butter. There's
about 5 eggs, 6
with
eggs.
blueberries and tons of eggs, and it's just
and then there's this sort of
breakfast.
I don't know what it is.
You.
What's this? What was that? Because there was pancakes and syrup on top. So he makes like a little sandwich out of this omelet and blueberries.
Yeah,
with pancakes instead of bread, and then pours syrup all over it.
Yeah,
but there's this like black goo. What on earth is that?
No, I think
chocolate sauce or.
I think the goo is like the blueberry sauce from the
blueberry sauce.
Yeah,
right.
I think it's just from that those tins of blueberries that they've done, and it's just like that sugary sauce. And you're just like, how can it's funny? It's just a funny moment because it's like, you know, that is like such a satirical look at what Midwestern Americans just gobble up every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absurd amount of butter and sugar.
Yeah. And I love the fact
sausage.
The pancakes are like,
they're huge.
By comparison, they are huge, but by comparison, when they're placed on top of the omelet and everything else, they look tiny.
Yes. So, yes.
The whole thing is just like a heart attack on a plate. It looks horrendous.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. It's disgusting. It's like you can have one bite and that's your entire calorie count for the day.
For the week.
For the week. Like it's insane. But I love this bit where this is where we kind of catch up with earlier where she's been banging on the door and they let her in and they're like, we're gonna call the cops. She's like, I need you to not call the cops, man.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And we get her first proper murder where she kills Frederick.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh.
And Barbara Hershey just walks in after the event. Yeah, Barbara Hershey walks in after the event and just stares, and we don't know what she's looking at this moment because it's a sort of mid shot on Barbara Hershey just staring in horror.
Yeah.
It cuts and she's got this knife in Ed Begley's chest. You know, and she's the look on her face is just, I told you not to call. I don't need you to call. As if she's really put out that she's had to kill him. And she just pulls the knife out and he drops down.
Yeah,
brilliant. You know, and so you have sort of realized that something isn't right about her. Yeah,
well, no, you realize in that moment she is the killer. Like because then that is, you know, in terms of the linearness of this film, the next bit is back to the bedroom where she does her stuff to Kyle Gallner's character. And now you're fully caught up. Now the film has revealed itself for what it is, and that is Kyle Gallner is the final guy, is the final girl. She is the monster, and he has to stop the monster before she goes and kills more people. And you're just like, oh my gosh, this has now become a cat and mouse game. and I didn't think this was cat and mouse in that sense. And it's just like, this is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then so now I see where we're going to go with this. Right, I'm with you now. And well, you better get her then, demon. But still, although my allegiance changes in that moment, I still. Do you lose any sympathy for the lady?
Yeah, I lose all sympathy for her. She's a psychopath.
See, I don't want her to escape, but I'm still sort of, again, in the same way that I do for the killer in Frenzy and some of those Hitchcock films, and Bruno in Strangers on a Train. I want her to get out of that freezer somehow, and I
know.
I sort of root for her a little bit. I mean, I'm not saying that she's my heroine, and that I sort of support her, but I do.
No,
the darker side of me had a bit of a, come on, get out of the freezer before, because he's called for some backup, and he's called for cops.
Yeah. So we guys were caught up at the house, and the demon has found her in the freezer, and she's cuffed in there, and he's called for backup, and he's like telling his buddy on the phone, yeah, I've fucked some shit up, and I need some help.
I need some help. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, just in that moment, I was thinking, "Come on, you got to get away now." Maybe it was because I didn't want the film to end, and I thought, maybe is it going to end now? Because I was enjoying it so much. But
maybe on that side, but no, I don't have any sympathy for her.
I had a brief sort of, come on, get out of this freezer. Get out of it and get away.
Yeah, in terms of like drama and suspense, like yeah, sure, but in terms of character, like. No, I once she's just murdered the old man, and then done her little deed on carving that guy's chest and wants to kill him. No way. I'm done. Yeah. I have no sympathy for her anymore. It's like, no, you've manipulated this.
Maybe mine was a visceral reaction, but driven by the drama and the suspense elements. But I remember thinking, come on, get out of this freezer. How are you going to get these handcuffs off? Just on that sort of wraps up in the moment, I suppose, because it's like nothing I'd see. It was brilliant. I was well into it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the lady has to be, as of now, the ultimate 21st century femme fatale.
Yeah,
definitely. and it's because the way she gets out of the freezer. She, despite all of this, she is still able to manipulate Kyle Gallner's character, the demon, and get him. He's put distance between them on purpose. He's not going to kill her. He doesn't want to kill her, but he's put distance because he's waiting for the cops to show. But she starts manipulating him and saying things and gets him to approach her.
Yeah, and playing with his head and all sorts of things.
Yes. Yeah. And you're just like, oh my God. And then she leaps up, bites his neck, and
full Dracula on her.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Like, it's those elements where it's like, that's the horror stuff, but the film isn't a horror film. Those are like horror homages.
Yeah, horror flourishes is what I'm going to say.
That's great. She goes full Dracula, rips his neck open, and I was just left stunned when I'm like, he dies. He bleeds to death.
Yeah, he dies.
I was like, he's our hero. Who's going to stop this bitch?
Yeah, he bleeds out. Yeah, and then there's
still 15 minutes of movie left.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree about her being the ultimate femme fatale at the present moment in time, because I also what I really like about this film is that she's now the serial killer that's mentioned in the opening words, the opening crawl of info, and you think apart from the fact that he is a cop and becomes determined to get her. So, and the reason that he's snorting cocaine in the car is to counteract the ketamine. Yeah, because he drags himself off the bed, gets all the cocaine out as much as and he just starts rubbing his face in it, to get. But for that, this is how she's treated every man that she's murdered in this entire spree.
Yeah.
So she is that femme fatale because they are all lured to her. And to that sex game.
Yep.
And then they all get suckered.
Yep.
And then they get sliced.
Yep.
She's You just don't see any of it, but you don't need to see it because you've seen it all play out in front of you.
Yes. Oh, I loved it. So she's able to manipulate the scene even more, and it is terrifying what she does. Honestly, terrifying what she does, because it goes back to that early conversation where she's like, "Oh, I could go in there and you could kill me, and women have to fear about all this." This film then now plays into those other sorts of fears, because she gets out of the freezer, uncuffs herself, and half undresses, and so when the cops arrive, she stages the scene to make it look like she had to kill the demon because he was going to do the R word and assault her.
And a bit like
I felt so uncomfortable. So uncomfortable.
So did I. And you were meant to.
Yeah.
But this, we talked about this in Out of the Past as well, about Kathy Moffat's ability to adapt to her surroundings and to adapt to her circumstances. And there's a little bit of that in this for me, where that's the only conceivable way that she could get out of the situation she's in. Yeah. So she goes through with it. She does it. She does it. And that is adapting to this. She didn't want to find herself in this position any more than Kathy Moffat does in some of the situations she finds herself in. So, but she's in them and she has to deal with them. Yeah. To further her own ends. There's your femme fatale quality again coming out. It's great, and she really plays the two. Well, she plays the female cop that comes like a fiddle.
Yes. Well, I was going to say that the film then sort of changes its sort of thematic focus, I think, a little bit, and instead of this sort of kind of dark romance playing on masculine and feminine fears, then it becomes more of this social commentary of this is what's being said. This is sort of how the situation looks. Do we believe what we see? And what we see isn't always what is.
Yeah.
And
it also says something about experience and novice.
Yes, because a lady cop, Gail, played by Madison Beatty, she is very much that sort of, if you want to go this way, she's very much that believe all women demographic.
Yeah.
And Steve, what's his name? Steven Quezada, who was in Breaking Bad, who plays Pete in this. He is very much like, whoa. We need to step back and read the scene and find out. And the lady cop Gail's like, no. You can clearly see. He's like, no.
She needs medical attention. You can see what's happened. And he says something along the lines of, I can't remember the exact quote. We need to leave
her where she is and wait for things to.
And he says, how about you give some thought to when you were back in diapers when I ran my first crime scene, or something like that, he says. Yeah. In other words, I've dealt with this. I've seen this. You haven't. Calm down.
Yes.
Be objective about it. Because she's thinking with heart and he's thinking with head,
Yeah. And it goes so terribly. And you keep thinking, okay, they're gonna get her. Okay, fine. They take her away in the car, they go driving, and then what do you know? Of course she gets the upper hand. The lady gets the upper hand, gets a gun, has the gun, and holds them hostage. It's interesting that she always wants to let the women go.
She lets the women go,
Until she doesn't. Until she doesn't. So the old hippie woman got away for a second. And you think, great, she's gone. She's going to get away. And then lo and behold, who is the woman who comes running out of the woods and stops a police car? Oh my God. And then she sees the lady in the back seat. And the lady has no other option but to kill her to save herself.
Yeah, and she's shouting, she killed my husband. She killed my husband. She's shouting all the time.
Yes.
And Pete, the cop, says, who? And that's when she notices her in the back
and she points
of the vehicle, and there's just a straight bullet in her head.
Yep, and you're just fabulous. Like, ugh. And then Pete's just like, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Because and you're just like, and you feel it. You feel that frustration. You feel that, God damn it
Yeah,
moment.
because in the worst possible way, he's been proven right, hasn't he?
Yes. And then obviously she lets Gale go, drives along a bit more, and puts a bullet in old Pete's head, and you're just like,
Pete's head. Poor old Pete.
And I found it interesting that this is a spoiler for Breaking Bad if you've never seen Breaking Bad. But so I don't know, skip like 10 seconds. But I found it interesting that Pete, the character of Pete, well, not the character of Pete, but Steven, who plays in Breaking Bad in this, in both films, he's playing police officers of some kind. And in both, he dies. He dies needlessly by vicious jerks.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm like, that's the character trope he found himself in.
yeah. What a CV.
But then we, again, this film isn't quite done after she's murdered him. There is an epilogue that I'm very, very happy we get. The lady gets picked up by some other woman driving a truck, and picks her up, puts her in her truck, and starts to drive on and things like that. And I can't remember what the lady says, but an altercation happens and the woman driving shoots.
She said, well, the lady has said to Pete says, why do you do it? Why do you kill him?
Yeah.
And she says, sometimes I see a devil instead of a human being.
Yes, that's right.
And then in the truck, because how much blood has she lost? How much trauma is she? And she's the woman doesn't really do anything. The woman doesn't say anything. But she sees a devil in the mirror.
Yes, that's right. Yes,
it's her own reflection, and she sees the devil. So she weakly gets out her own gun.
That's she's losing her. Yes,
she's losing her mind. So she gets out the gun because she thinks that the devil is telling her to kill the driver. But the driver, unbeknownst to her, has got her own gun and shoots her.
Yes. And I feel like there's something being said about the fact that it's not a man who kills her, but a woman.
Yeah.
It's not male violence. It's not whatever. It's just this woman picks up on the fact that she's insane and going to kill her if she can. So she
and she says, I had to kill her.
Yeah.
Because she was gonna kill me, essentially.
Yes.
So, but that's what it is. I don't think she actually says anything that trips it. I think she, presumably because of the blood loss, the lady is just starting to hallucinate. And
I think you're right.
Grip.
Yeah. I think so. And I love the death scene. The death scene is incredible. It's so well acted. Like that deserves an Oscar. That performance deserves an Oscar. Like
definitely.
She's sitting, the way she just sort of is kind of convulsing a little bit, and the way she kind of grays out, and then but also the way that the camera, like the beginning of the movie, begins in black and white. This slowly fades from color to black and white, and ends in proper noir territory again.
Proper noir territory,
which again reminded me of Out of the Past.
I was just going to say, like you say, at the end, you know exactly where these two have been heading all along.
Yeah, and death was the only
way these two are going to get out of it, and the way that. And that is a noir thing. We've talked about that loads of times on this show. That in noir, characters often have to meet the destiny that they have been provided with. And that is death. You can't escape it. That's what The Postman Always Rings Twice is about. That's what Double Indemnity is about. It's what it's what they're all about. They're all on this road to destruction. And these two definitely are. And there is a hint of Out of the Past about that. There is a throwback to Out of the Past on that. Where you realise that all along, Robert Mitchum and Jane Greer couldn't possibly have ended up in any other situation. It had to end the way it does.
Yeah.
Because any other ending would be a cop-out short of anything else.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. Is like, I know there's a lot of talk about this being... There's a lot of talk about Strange Darling in the horror context, but the whole time I was watching it, I just kept thinking, this is noir. This is neo-noir. This is Out of the Past. This is Fargo. This is that. This is this,
Yeah. I didn't get any I was left in no doubt when I'd finished this film that I'd watched a thriller.
Yeah.
Neo-noir thriller. I'll certainly agree to that. I didn't come away from it thinking I've just watched a horror film.
No, my suspicion is that because watching some of the behind the scenes stuff on the 4K, they basically they kind of talk about like what are the major genres at the moment, and the two genres that make the most money, one being oversaturated comic book movies, the other being generally horror.
Yeah.
So I think I get the impression that because in the interviews they all the director and the actors, they all refer to this as a thriller. Oh, and horror and horror, a thriller. Oh, and horror and horror and horror. And I feel like this is blatantly written as a noir, neo-noir film with horror flourishes, and then for marketing purposes has lent more into the horror as the superior genre, where I think the horror elements are subordinate to the noirness of this.
I can go along with that. I can go along with that. I mean, if you do a Google search for is Strange Darling a horror film, you will find a lot of people saying that it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's billed as horror stroke suspense on if you Google it, just the top thing that comes up with Google says horror stroke suspense, and it's yes, it's suspense. Yes, there are horrific elements to it, but it's
there are horror flourishes. It depends how you define horror, I suppose. If you define horror as slasher or paranormal, then no. But if you subscribe to the idea that horror fiction and horror cinema is anything that grabs you by the senses that are responsible for unsettling you or instilling fear, then I can go along with I can buy into that, because there are situations in this that if you were the bit where he's going through the house saying "Hi Kitty, hey Kitty, Kitty" and all that.
Yes.
If she were innocent and she's hiding in a freezer, in a house with a lunatic with a gun. If you were in that situation, then you'd be terrified.
Yes.
That can appeal, in inverted commas, to the horror sensibilities of an audience. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I guess horror, and the thing is, like, you can't really have crime fiction without horrific elements. When there's murder and fighting for your life situations, those all lead into horror elements. So I guess it's a blurred line a little bit, but I look at this film and I just thought this is a neo-noir. This is thriller.
Yeah, I'm certainly not gonna get into an argument with somebody who is adamant this is a horror film, because that's fair enough if that's what you want to take it as. But I come away from films like I would come away from Seven thinking that was more a horror film than this.
Yeah. Well,
because some of the things we'll probably cover Seven at some point. But some of the things that happen in that the killer that John Doe makes people do in that
are horrific.
Horrific.
Yeah. I think for me that one of the key things is investigation, and there is investigation. There is someone who is trying to solve a problem, and Kyle Gallner's character begins as a romance that turns sour, and then the next thing is she's a criminal. I have to stop her. And then there's investigative elements to it where, you think, I don't know, you think of some of the other horror films, there's not really investigative elements. There's just run from monster, stop monster. That's oversimplification, but
whatever the monster may be, the monster may be. I mean, I would tend to look at this as it's like Hitchcock on steroids. Yeah. Because this is a film where this is suspense more than anything else, and how is it all going to play out? How are they going to get out of this situation? Yeah. Oh my God, she's the villain. What's he going to do now? Those are Hitchcockian elements to me.
Yes,
and
yes. Well, the killing of the demon before the end is psycho.
Psycho, yeah, absolutely.
Your protagonist is now dead, and you're like, wait, what? What?
And there are, I mean, I know, conceding that it was caught up in the suspense in the moment. I mean, that's exactly how it is in Frenzy for me. I don't for a minute sympathize with the lunatic killer in Frenzy. God, but in that scene, people who've seen it will know what I'm talking about. In the scene where he has to recover a vital piece of evidence that's got lost with a corpse in a sack of potatoes, you are desperate for him to find it. The film has manipulated you into you suddenly on his side for that moment. And I do have a sense of that with this, but obviously Hitchcock didn't do anything this bloody.
It's too many restrictions at the time.
Too many restrictions at the time. But if life were different and the chronology of everyone's existence were different, and he was making films now, he bloody would do now.
Oh yeah,
and it'd be something along the lines of this. I mean, when you see him blow her ear off, and when he blows her ear off, it's absolutely sort of gut wrenching,
gruesome.
So I can see there, like I said before, there are horror flourishes in this film, but I think my overriding thought about the genre of this film is that it is a neo-noir thriller. Before it's anything else.
No,
a bloody good one. I
think to sort of cap off briefly, I do want to mention the cinematographer Giovanni Ribis. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. He's a famous actor. He's a famous actor who plays most recently in the show Sneaky Pete, but I have always known him as Phoebe's brother on Friends.
Yeah.
And I was like, when I found out that he was a cinematographer, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. Because I don't really know anything about him, but apparently he was a child actor. He's grown up around films. But the thing that was really interesting to me is that he's worked with a lot of people, and some people he worked with in particular. One person in particular was Dante Spinati, who we have mentioned on this podcast before, who is the DP for things like Manhunter and LA Confidential. And you cannot watch this film and see these lights and the way that the saturation and the neonness of it and not think of Manhunter. I definitely thought of Manhunter several times watching and looking at the way these shots are composed and look. And, Manhunter was not the best, but visually was effing great.
Yeah. And it's just, when they're in the motel room, so they're outside the hotel and it's all bathed in blue.
Yeah.
When they're in the hotel room, it's all bathed in red.
Yeah. Well, the bathroom particularly, yeah.
And the bathroom particularly, and all that is beautiful to look at. And you're right that harks back to Manhunter.
Yeah. So you can kind of, when you make those connections, like, oh, some of this makes sense because I can see where this film sort of has shades of that film and shades of that film, and some, because he also worked with the DP for Lord of the Rings, and that again is like, you can see where these people who are working with people who are original.
yeah, exactly.
You can see the talent in every aspect of this film because the people who are working on it are people who know their craft.
Yeah, and movies are collaborative. So the best movies are the movies where everyone works towards the common goal. And you said at the beginning, when you've got a director who knows what that end result should be and has explained it to everybody so well that they all get it as well.
Yeah.
So everyone is going in the right direction.
Yeah.
You can just tell when that pays off on the screen, and it does here.
Yes. Should we rate this guy?
Thank God for that contractual clause that said he was entitled to his director's cut.
Seriously, because that this is the non-linearness of it makes it so much more exciting and interesting, and I love it.
Yeah, but, absolutely.
I think we should rate it.
Go on, now, rate it.
As we know, or as you know, we rate all of our films out of 5 Falcons, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Out of 5 Falcons, I would give Love Lies Bleeding. I don't know why I said Love Lies Bleeding. I would give Strange Darling a solid 5.
Yeah, it's a 5 Falcon film.
Yeah,
everything about it. For the first time, I was telling a friend of mine. I said, "Have you seen this film?" And he said no. And I said, I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a film I didn't know and was watching for the first time this much.
Yeah,
and that says it all for me. You know,
yeah.
I've seen films that I've not seen and enjoyed them. Seen some, hated them. This grabbed me from the beginning, from the opening frame to the last frame, and never let me go.
No. It's also a cool 1 hour and 30 minutes. It knows
a cool 1 hour and
pace,
30 minutes.
Doesn't overstay its welcome, but tells a complete and deep story about.
It tells a complete and deep story. It's got a lot of theme. It's got a lot of points to make, but it's also a damned entertaining story that's well acted, well directed, and well shot. There's no flab on it at all. There's no scenes that drag, and there are no scenes that I think are extraneous. I think every frame counts in this, and it's not often you can genuinely say that, but this is one of them.
Yeah,
so
I
it is
totally agree.
Absolute 5 for me. Highly recommended.
Well, I think we've thoroughly investigated
Strange
Darling. I think it's clear as day that we are highly recommending everyone go out and buy the physical copy of this film because it's worth owning on DVD.
Tell as many people as you can about it because it deserves wide recognition, this film.
Absolutely.
And that wraps up our investigation. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another case. In the meantime, please like and subscribe and be sure to take care walking down those mean streets.